First, you start with them beef taquitos.
And then, to make it extra authentic, you go in with the Fiesta blend, like them enchiladas that my aunt used to make. And then we'd go on down to the Dollar Tree, the dollar store, right? And then you get the quesadilla.
Not the quesadilla.
Yes, the quesadilla.
That's the one. That's the little creature. It looks like a little pig. It rolls itself into a basketball.
Oh, you're right. Yes. Yes. And you know what? It's such a pretty name. I almost named my daughter Anchelita.
And welcome back to another episode of Crips and Corks. I'm your host, DJ. Here with my co-host.
Paul, as usual.
Totally dependent on me. If I don't introduce him, he would sit there staring blankly at the camera for the rest of the episode.
Hey, listen, it's a tradition. You have to introduce me.
You would think that 80-something episodes in, I would know how to do this by now.
Right, and you know what? Cher doesn't introduce herself at her own shows. Taylor Swift is not introducing herself, okay?
Hey, it's me, Cher. I'm introducing myself. Everyone put your hands together for me, bitch.
She doesn't do that.
She doesn't do that. But you know what? She's probably one of the only people who, performers who could do that. And it would be like, yes.
Yeah, I could see it. Moral of the story is I'm too famous to introduce myself.
Okay.
That's why you always introduce me.
I see. I'm the master of ceremonies and you're the hired help. Got it.
I'll remember that. I'll remember that one.
Just add it to my tab.
I will.
Anyways, so we are continuing with our blessings and curses. Paul, what blessings and curses did you experience this week?
So for my blessing, I've been hanging out with my friends a lot lately. Last weekend, as DJ said in the last episode, our good friend Robert was here.
Yes.
And this weekend is Pride, so rest in peace to my liver. And it's so much fun to spend so much time with your friends and things, but also it's kind of like a double-edged sword because there's less time to do things you actually need to do. Like DJ can attest, my apartment's a mess, and I haven't had time to I've been trying to get back into working out, but it just hasn't been happening.
It's so hard.
I wake up exhausted from doing all this shit because we're so busy right now. It's such a busy time of year.
Oh, I really wish. I'm a bad guy. I really wish we could have just said fuck Pride and had a quiet weekend working on the podcast.
Right, because there's so much work to do, guys. We put in a lot of work for you guys.
Yeah, and we have friends coming in again next weekend.
Yeah, it's hard being popular. I know, I get it. Wah,
Poor little rich boys.
Right, as I'm in my Calvin Klein sweater.
I'm in a Planet Fitness staff sweatshirt that's 3 sizes too big, and I've never worked at Planet Fitness.
And that's okay. It's about the aesthetic. There's people who dress up as nurses, and they've never been a nurse in their life.
I'm a sexy Planet Fitness staff member. You want to meet me in the locker room?
Do you want me to wipe down your machine?
Oh, that's a good one. No. Let me wipe down your equipment.
Ooh, okay. I'll show you how to use my equipment.
Oh, that's a good one.
Ooh, okay.
Okay, what's your curse?
I guess it was a blessing and a curse all in one
It
again.
was together? Okay.
Whoops. Okay.
That's funny because my blessing and curse goes hand in hand. My blessing is I'm learning Portuguese because I'm going to Portugal.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
My curse is I only know 2 words and I've been practicing it for 3 weeks. And those words are pão, which is bread, and sorvete, which is ice cream.
Listen, you got the 2 most important food groups
I
there,
know.
okay?
You know what? I think if those are the only 2 words I know going over, I might be okay. Also, I did learn how to say bye, and it's ciao. Which is basically the Italian ciao, but a little more accented. Ciao.
And we know the other words you need to know, like top, bottom.
You know what? I know enough French that I'm just going to lap into French. Tu es agressif?
Y passivo?
Je suis passif?
Passive.
Aggressive is top, passive is bottom.
Aggressive. Wildcats.
Oh my god.
That's what it's giving. Aggressive. It's like...
Je suis aggressive.
That's not from... This isn't from High School Musical,
This
though.
is from Friends.
Well, this is from a cheerleading movie. Because they were like the Wildcats.
Chandler.
Well, I don't know your reference, and I guess you don't know mine. And that's
Why does
okay.
nobody know Friends? When did everyone stop watching Friends?
Well, I know Friends. Like, Friends is an okay show. It has its moments.
So does Sailor Moon.
Yeah, Sailor Moon's a legend and icon and a classic, and everybody loves Sailor Moon. Get into it.
It has its moments.
Anime kids or not, get into it.
Okay. Do you have anything for Pop Culture Corner?
I do. First, really quickly, let's talk about the American Music Awards. Because yikes.
I didn't watch it. Fill me in.
It's supposed to be a fan-voted award, right?
I guess that didn't happen. Shocker.
No, Taylor Swift did not win one award, and Billie Eilish won every single award she was nominated for. Bitch, I don't know one Billie Eilish fan, but I know 72 Taylor Swift fans, so I'm not sure what was going on there. People are saying they were snubbing Taylor because she's, because she's a very democratic person, and the American Music Awards are kind of right-leaning, so they were snubbing Taylor. Yeah.
Is Billy right-leaning?
No, I don't know. I guess they like her more than Taylor. Or maybe for...
I know the Chapel rumors. I know the Benson Boone rumors.
And you know what's funny, too, about the American Music Awards? Not one of the major winners were there. They all accepted over video.
Weird.
And they were all touring. Bitch, ain't that many artists on the road right now.
No,
Sorry.
because at the beginning of the year, you looked to see who was touring, and you said, no one's touring this year.
Right. Like, what's going on? And honestly, having Jennifer Lopez host, like, she's cute, she's cool, whatever. That opening number, she did that party. But girl, let's be real for a second. It was kind of...
Well, J-Lo's kind of in that American Idol stage of her career.
Yeah.
Where this was probably the hottest ticket she had.
Right. Very that.
I mean, when you date Ben Affleck 3 times and then he divorces you for Matt Damon, you don't got a lot going for you.
Hold up. Was that a joke?
I mean...
Divorcing for Matt Damon? What's going on?
You don't know about, like, the utter bromance that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck have going on?
Let me get him for him a little more. Okay. No, I did not know about that.
So they have been best friends for, like, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, like, all these collages of them, like, they always sit together at award ceremonies because they're that close. And I think there was a quote from, like, an ex-girlfriend of Ben Affleck or ex-wife, and it's like, you know, when he's been with you for a couple years, but he's been friends with Matt for, like, going on 20. There's no competition.
Right. It is hard when you have that, like, really close best friend. Like, I imagine, like, when I eventually get in a relationship, like, it'll be that way with, like, you and Robert. Like, friends I've had for years and I'm super close with. Like, they'll compete for sure, and, like, they'll be in the run. Okay, that's making it sound bad. They will do more than compete. If I'm in a relationship, I will do my best to value them as best as I can. You know what, I'm just gonna take my foot, put it back in my mouth, take it out of my mouth, do what I gotta do, and stop wandering down this twisty trail that I'm going down right now.
Anything else for Pop Culture Corner?
Annabelle got loose. Allegedly.
Did she? Okay.
Allegedly.
Okay. Yes, I heard allegedly, but, like, they were like, she got loose. And I was like, did she really get loose? And then Tony Spera had to come out and say, Annabelle's fine.
Okay, but if you look at the video, that could have been filmed anywhere, anytime. There was no, like, timestamp of when he was, like, with Annabelle that made it like, oh, this was filmed yesterday. And you know what? He wasn't even in, like, the video part where he was showing her. He was, like, filming it himself, so he wasn't even in the video part. You
But
couldn't
also,
see him. He could have
she's on
voiced
tour.
over.
she's on tour with Ron Buell, which I'm not hating Ron Buell, but he is a known addict and he has been known to lie for clout back in the day.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah. I mean,
Also, you know what? I gotta say something about like love the Warrens, hate the Warrens. The Warrens always maintain that Annabelle was possessed by an evil entity and don't touch her because she can really harm you.
right.
So the fact that Judy, Warren Spare, and Tony are letting Annabelle go out on tour with Ryan Buell or otherwise, it kind of bothers me because either you're admitting it's a hoax or it's such a slap in the face to the memory of Ed and Lorraine Warren, which, even if you don't agree with them, they are well noted paranormal figures. And if you're supposedly doing everything to cherish their memory, then why are you going to basically stomp on it like it's a used condom? And I've always said that.
Okay, well, yes, I get. Well, I don't know. I don't think that's stomping on the memory of the Warrens. They're taking Annabelle on tour. They're just trying to get their money. Like, get your bag, sis.
Yeah, I guess because Connecticut did shut down the museum.
Yeah, so get your bag, sister. I mean, if
And
your
before
parents-
anyone's like, of course they did because it was spooky. No, it was actually because they were running out of their house, which was not zoned to be open to public for tours.
Mm-hmm. No, about that for sure, for sure. No, do I think Annabelle actually got loose? Maybe. Maybe she was out and about. Maybe she burnt down that plantation.
Hopefully she did. And if she did, I think we should have let her see what other righteous vengeance she would have wreaked.
Right. Annabelle is a liberal girly pop. She's here for the girls, the dolls, and the divas.
But what I'm really glad about is like that mansion burning down really highlighted. I can't remember the name of it, but I see it on TikTok, and they're open as a museum, and they're very open about refusing to hold events or weddings there, and they say and like they're very open, and they're like, this is like a human trafficking and abuse place. This is like everyone acknowledges that we can't hold weddings at Auschwitz, so why do you want to hold a wedding here?
That's tea. That's tea.
And I was like, I never thought about it that way, and that's how we should think about it. And I'm glad to be educated that way.
No, I agree. I agree very much so. But
Anything else?
Nope. I was just
Let's drink after that.
Cool.
Today we are drinking a Dark Horse Merlot. A true winemaker's wine. We founded Dark Horse with a bold mission. Use winemaking techniques typically reserved for expensive wines on a wine that our friends could actually afford. Our Merlot is aged for up to 12 months to create a smooth mouthfeel. Paul knows a thing or two about mouthfeel. With notes of dark cherries, blue violet, and toasted oak.
I like how it said up to 12 months. Like, there's no set time. They're just like, this feels right.
Are you ready yet? That was weak. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
ASMR pour.
Okay. She smells interesting, for sure. Like, interesting in a good way, not interesting in a bad way, like interesting usually means.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh.
I think it needs to air.
That is probably the driest wine I've ever had.
That is not the driest wine you've ever had.
That's bad, bitch. That don't taste good. That don't taste right. That is not of God. This... I'll give it one more try, but girl...
Don't do what I just did.
That's bad.
But we're gonna drink it.
I'm sorry, Dark Horse, but that was bad. That's a 0 grapes. Don't waste your money on that shit.
Sorry.
What, are you gonna give it 5?
No. I'm gonna give it a 2.
Right, it's not a good wine. Maybe it's expired because it tastes like bad.
Well, no, like red wines, you're supposed to let them aerate before you drink.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I said it might get better the longer it sits.
I don't know if that's getting better, but from the look of your face, it isn't.
It was better than when I tried to aerate it myself and went.
Yeah, that was an interesting method.
Actual, like, people who are into wine will do that.
Oh God, you won't catch me.
I'm not making this up.
That's embarrassing. You'll never catch me at the wine cellar doing whatever teeth suckling noise.
Before we do the story, let me tell you how I learned that. When I was in high school, my teacher, my math teacher, would eat apples and he would like with his mouth wide open, and somebody said, like, Mr. So-and-so, we're not going to call him out on the pod. Can you not do that because that's really disgusting? And he goes, actually, I learned in a wine class that if, like, the more air you get, it aerates it and it gives it a bolder taste. And so if it works for wine, it will work for my apple. I think he was just an asshole who liked chewing with his mouth open. But
yeah, that sounds disgusting. And
but I have seen
awful.
people, like, do the, like, trying to get air into their mouth while drinking wine.
That's crazy.
We're going to be done with this conversation, though, now.
Okay. Do you have a story to share with us,
I
DJ?
do. Let me tell you a story about a dark horse.
Ooh.
He skyrocketed from crippling poverty to becoming a nationally recognized figure. He grew up as an outcast in a small Indiana town and transformed himself into a man who rubbed shoulders and was celebrated by the most powerful politicians of his day. But as he formed his church, he struggled to identify if his religion was Christianity or socialism. But one thing is clear. To Jim Jones, there was only one God, and that God was power. Today, we discuss the infamous cult leader who became a mass murderer, striving for glory through a revolutionary suicide, and the road to Jonestown. Part 1, Jim Jones and the People's Temple.
That was a really good intro.
Thank
First
you.
of all, that sounded really fucking cool.
Thank you.
And yes, and for those who don't know at home, Jim Jones is the drink the Kool-Aid guy.
Yes. Now, we're not going to get into that today because as I started diving into this, there is so much, like, you can't, there's a reason why I'm calling, so this is going to be 2 parts and 2 parts only, I promise. The reason I'm calling it The Road to Jonestown is because I wanted to do Jonestown, but very quickly into researching, I found out that we can't cover that event without doing a deep dive into the cult leader himself.
Yes, I completely agree because he had such an interesting upbringing.
Oh my God,
and
yes.
Just his road to where Jonestown got to where it was.
So I was actually talking to my father and I said, like, oh, I'm doing Jonestown, but only like part 1. He said, is there enough information for you to do 2 parts? And I said, yeah. And he's like, well, what's part 1? And I said, it's just about Jim Jones and his cult, People's Temple. And
Right.
he goes, well, tell me about him. Like, if he's interesting enough for a full episode. I talked for a full half an hour with just the Spark Notes. And he was like, holy shit.
Right, because so many people don't realize the story of what happened, how he got to be where he was, and like, it's such an interesting story.
And there's so many moments where it could have stopped.
Right, but fate, whatever, brought us here. But
Yeah.
why don't we stop talking about it? Why don't you tell us
Yeah.
about it?
So James Warren Jones was born on May 13th, 1931 in Crete, Indiana. So this is the height of the Great Depression in flat, boring Indiana. I apologize if you live in Indiana.
I don't. It's flat and boring.
Oh no, I wasn't apologizing for saying it's flat and boring. I was apologizing that they live there.
Period.
His father, James Thurmont Jones, was soon called Big Jim because you had Big Jim and Little Jim.
Right.
Was a veteran of the First World War who had suffered serious injuries to his lungs in a gas attack, which left him unable to find meaningful or long-lasting employment. And his injuries weathered him away so badly that quickly his nickname went from being Big Jim to Old Jim.
That's a sad moment in life when you go from Big Jim to Old Jim. That's just sad as.
And I'm trying
that's
to.
so sad.
Hang on, let me do the math. I think he was born in like 1887, and so like
shit.
So, like, he was an older father.
Not the 1800s. That's crazy.
Yeah. His wife, Lynetta Putnam, was considerably younger than him, 15 years to be exact.
Okay.
And was considered a pain in the ass within the community. She was known for being disagreeable. She would often pick fights just for the fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
She had illusions of grandeur. She claimed to be a Cherokee Indian. She also claimed at one point to be aristocracy. She enjoyed cursing just for fun. She would greet people. Howdy, you old son of a bitch!
And back in that day, that was a big deal, okay? Especially in the Midwest, where, like, they're very God-fearing people.
Yes. And this is a rural town. Like, this is a country town.
And let alone being a woman and a woman cursing at that time.
And the worst thing that she did. Brace yourselves. Sit down. If you're driving, close your eyes. She wore pants.
Pants? A lady in pants? Oh, my lord.
Now, remember how I mentioned that she often self-aggrandized herself?
Yes.
So she would often claim to have been a queen or great poet in her past life. And that because she was so great in her last life, she couldn't be bothered to do anything in this life.
See, you claim to be great in your past life, but you don't let it get to your head in this life.
No,
That's the difference.
I firmly believe I was Jacqueline Kennedy in my past life.
Yes.
I'm doing a paranormal podcast with about 5 followers.
With my bitch ass.
2 of those followers are your mother.
Right. You're definitely not letting anything go to your head.
No. She also claimed that when she was pregnant with James, she had a dream that she stood on the banks of the river of death, and that she was being crucified until the spirit of her mother appeared to her and said, Lynetta, you cannot die. You are going to give birth to a great man who will do great things.
And unfortunately, she gave birth to a man who did a lot of things.
Now,
this
striving for glory is going to come up again and again throughout this story. Now, remember, his father could not work, so they were in dire financial straits. Very early on right now we're going to call him Jimmy.
Okay.
Very early on in Jimmy's life, the family had their house foreclosed upon. And old Jim's family bought them a shack with no plumbing and no electricity.
Not the shack.
In the nearby town of Lynn where they lived for the family to move into. There, old Jim and Lynetta tried to establish a farm until old Jim's health gave out and they were unable. So they were living off scraps from his family. And they would sometimes go into the woods to forage for fallen fruit, berries, and mushrooms.
See, that's just such a sad life to have to live on scraps and forage it. That just, right off the bat, not a good situation at all.
No. Now, when Jimmy came of school age, old Jim's family told Lynetta that there was no reason for her to stay home considering there wasn't a house to keep.
Damn!
And she had to go work.
She said...
So she got a job at the local factory.
Yes.
Now, granted, she's just working on the conveyor line, but later in life, when Jim got big, she would say, I worked at that factory and I led a labor movement demanding better workers' rights. That never happened.
It sounds like she's full of lies and deceit.
No, she just, what do you mean I gotta do better? I know my quota's 80, but you should be happy with my 20. I was a queen in my last life.
She sounds like the worst person.
She really was. Like, this woman would pick fights for the fun of it.
Right. Now, I can get behind, like, trying to be, like, the woman wearing pants, trying to be forward-thinking and a trendsetter in that sense.
No, everything she sounds like, I don't think she wore pants because she preferred pants, because they were easier to walk in. I really do think she did it just to piss people off.
Which I'm here for. Piss off those. I'll wear pants, yeah. I'm here for that.
I'm all here for, like, pissing, like, small money people off.
Right.
But this is just, like, a woman who enjoyed pissing people off.
See,
One of those people.
yeah, okay.
If she were alive today, we would call her a Karen.
Period. Okay, it is giving that. Now that you say that, it is giving Karen.
So while she went to work, old Jim would go to the local pool hall. It was a dry town, so he would drink coffee or a cola, play cards, and play pool all day because he couldn't do anything else because of his lungs. What about Jimmy? He was left to roam the streets on his own all day long, sometimes butt-ass naked if there were no clean clothes.
That's wild. But can you imagine how sad that is, though? Just sitting in a pool hall, stone cold sober, just sitting there for hours.
Oh my god,
the boredom?
You got any threes? Go fish.
Right. Sorry, guys, I'm shaking. I'm going through soda withdrawal. Like, what are we doing?
Myrtle, can I get another decaf? Old Jim just sounds like somebody who drank decaf. I can't have the calf. I can have one Coke at lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Any more caffeine, and I am going. You see my tremor? It's gonna look like a jackhammer.
He probably gave the craziest hand jobs, though, with that tremor.
I don't think he was giving hand jobs.
No, but just real quick.
I think it's lucky that Lynetta got pregnant. I think she mounted him and rode him while he laid there.
He said, "You're gonna give me a baby one way or another." And then...
I mean, considering his family was supporting them, probably the family said, we're gonna cut you off. Like, you're just two lazy people, and she probably was, give me a baby.
Very that. And just one more thing about the pool hall. It's giving, like... Picture the dive bar in your town, like the saddest dive bar in your town. And imagine that sober. That's what it's giving. It's not the tea.
It is. It's got the half wall of the shitty sheet wood paneling.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the wall is that... It's like the corkboard ceilings that they used to do, but on the walls.
Right.
There's various stains and cigarette holes. There's probably a bunch of posters for Coca-Cola because you can't drink.
Right.
There's probably a calendar. This is in the 1930s, so it's probably from 1914. And it has the most tame pinup girl ever. It's like she's lifting up her skirt so you see a sliver of ankle.
Right. It's very that. God, what a
There's
sad
a bar
life.
for some reason.
Well, you gotta serve the soda somewhere, the coffee.
And there's... I don't think... I know I made the joke about murder. I don't think there was a woman waitress. I think it was a big fat guy who always wore a and a stained apron, who had 3 hairs on his head.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his name was Cletus.
Get into Cletus, y'all.
Cletus, I need another cup of decaf. All right, old Jim, I'm brewing it fresh for you.
Honestly, his dad was probably so sad. What a sad life.
It was the Depression.
Literally the Depression.
It was the Depression.
Okay.
Anyways, so as Jones began to walk around the town, some of the townswomen took pity on him, and they would take him in, give him a bath and something to eat before sending him on his way. Now, the one who had the most influence on young Jimmy Jones was Mrs. Myrtle Kennedy, the wife of the Nazarene minister. That's a denomination of Christianity.
Period.
She, whenever she'd see Jim out, she would call him in and she'd give him about something to eat, and she began teaching him the Bible and eventually gave him a copy of his own, taught him how to read, taught him the tenets of her faith, and would take him to church on Sundays.
Okay.
Now, Jones grew fascinated, not with the religion, but with the pastor, and the sway and power he seemed to hold over the congregation. And he became determined that one day he would grow up to be a pastor with the same power over his own congregation.
That's really interesting that he noticed, like, the pastor. He wasn't into the religious part. He was over like the controlling people part.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much foreshadowing of what he's interested in right off the bat here.
Oh, for sure. Now, Jones, who's like all of 7 years old, immediately begins to visit all the local churches, attending multiple different services at different church every Sunday. And he was baptized into any church that would baptize him, he would get baptized in.
So he's going around and he's probably taking notes.
Yes.
And he's learning from these pastors what makes them like, what makes people like them, and taking notes and trying to be that person.
At one point, Lynette actually walked in on Jim imitating the local Pentecostal minister in his bedroom and actually attempted to stop him from ending church because she said, that's just creepy.
It is, like, if he...
Could you imagine, okay, your 8-year-old son, in the name of Jesus, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it's weird for sure. Like, I don't know. Kids are impressionable though, so like I get it, but
I mean, I had a friend who definitely took me to like her church, which was a little like tent revival-y. Mm-hmm. And I definitely saw somebody speak tongues, and I definitely went home and walked up to my dad, who is like very, very like clean cut, and went, "Daddy, I can speak in tongues." Blah, blah, blah.
it is weird.
I was not allowed to go to church with friends anymore after that.
Yeah, because that shit's weird. And also, like, his mom's not religious. So, like, him getting so into religion probably weirded her out.
I heard at one point that neither the Jones parents went to church, which further made them outcasts in the community.
Right.
Because you just went to church at this point.
Right, it was a community thing.
Now, neighbors were sympathetic towards the ignored, impoverished Jimmy, but noted he was a strange child obsessed with religion and death. On the daily, he would scour neighborhoods for roadkill and gather younger kids for pretend funerals he would preside over. There's even one story that he actually caught a stray cat and slit its throat when he couldn't find roadkill, so he could perform a funeral. On other occasions, he would take other children to the local coffin factory and make them lay in the coffins to prepare for their deaths.
That's insane. This kid is not right. Like, especially the murdering the cat. That is...
Allegedly.
Oh, okay, allegedly. But even, like, collecting the roadkill to, like, do the funerals, it's just, like, so weird. This obsession with, like, ritual? I don't... Because that's, like...
Yes.
An obsession with ritual, not religion or anything, I feel like. And, like, even, like, making your friends lay in coffins at whatever age this is, that's crazy.
I know.
Bitch.
I identify as Catholic.
Yeah.
And I do like the ritual aspect of the church. But I'm also, like, a spooky bitch, and all that ritual appeals to my spooky side.
Right.
That has nothing to do with my beliefs. My beliefs are... My faith is my own.
Right.
We're not going to get into it.
Right.
But I like the ritual, and that's whatever. I know plenty of friends who agree with me on all faith principles, but they go, I hate the Catholic Church. All that ritual is just woo-woo stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's a big reason why a lot of the other Christian faiths don't like the Catholic Church.
Oh, it's why they call us Satanists, because it is so much like witchcraft.
Right. But tracking back to Jim Jones, like, this obsession with death from an early age, it's so weird to me. Like, how did this even come about? Like, because I mean, I guess his father's aging, so maybe his parents are talking about death and things, and it just, like, sinks in his head, and he starts thinking about it, and his brain just snowballed into, like, oh, I'm gonna die one day. Let me prepare for it and prepare all my friends for it. Let's go lay in these coffins.
Or maybe he, like, attended a funeral and, like, felt like that was when a pastor had the most control.
Oh, when he had
because when you're in grief, you just kind of like anyone who's like willing to like take over, you kind of just let them.
So he noticed that's when people are most vulnerable.
That's why also like he was very good at preying on vulnerabilities.
Yeah, he noticed that's when people were vulnerable was funerals, and that's why he liked. Okay, I like that theory. I mean, these are all just theories.
Yeah, these are all just theories. We're just spitballing in the dark.
Yes.
Now, despite his religious fervor, Jimmy was described as a bad kid. He was often caught stealing candy from local stores, and his mother would have to go into they would call her and say, Mrs. Jones, your son was in here stealing candy again. And she would have to go in and pay for it out of what little money they had. And then she would go home and beat Jimmy with a leather belt. Remember beatings.
Right.
He would also walk around the town, a 7-year-old boy, and would curse at people like Lynetta, often greeting people, "Good morning, you dirty bastard," and "Hello, you son of a bitch."
That's crazy. But again, remember, he's not interested in the morality and that part of the religion, so it makes sense.
Jones himself even bragged later in life that he would often pull sacrilegious pranks on the churches he attended regularly, such as stealing the Pentecostal minister's Bible and covering it in manure, and urinating in a font of holy water at the local Catholic church.
Pissing in the holy water is crazy.
That would be that's a good band name, Pissing in the Holy Water.
It does kind of roll off the tongue. No, he's doing all sorts of wild things. Surprisingly, a lot of anti-religious things.
Well, this is gonna, like I said in the intro, like he really struggled to define what it was he believed in. Oh, this is a good part. Now, Jones's admiration for powerful figures was not limited to ministers and clerics, but also political figures. Because around this time, in the late 30s, he developed a little bit of a celebrity crush on none other than Adolf Hitler.
Oh!
Now, let me be clear. He did not admire Adolf Hitler out of any political affinity, but for the sheer power and sway he held over Germany. He soon turned a group of children into his own little Luftwaffe. I know that's the Air Force, but I couldn't remember the name for, like, the ground troops. And he would force them to goose-step through the town and give him Nazi salutes.
That's insane.
And this is at the start of World War II.
How did he not get lynched for that? That's insane, bitch.
Once he came across a military caravan transporting German POWs, and he gave them the Hitler salute while shouting "Heil Hitler" to them. I'm surprised those soldiers didn't shoot that little motherfucker.
Right. Like, why did the soldiers, like, give him at least one little hit for that? Because that's fucking crazy.
They probably thought he was mocking them. Which he could have.
Either way, that's insane, bitch.
Now, at this point, Jones had no political beliefs, and he instead admired and tried to imitate leaders whose powers and style led to adoration, such as Gandhi, or total control such as Stalin and Hitler.
Right. It's never the obsession with the ideology.
No, and even like the obsession with Hitler, everyone's like, it wasn't like Hitler's beliefs, because actually later on in life, Jones stood for everything that Hitler was against and fought everything Hitler was for. It was just that style. And like even later in his preaching, Jones would kind of do the same thing Hitler doing, starting very slowly and building to a great crescendo and then slowly calming down.
Right. Yeah, he's just obsessed with controlling people and how he can control people from a very early age, having power over people.
Now, all this made Jones an increasingly isolated figure within his community, as his religious fervor, penchant for dictators, and bad behavior turned the townspeople against him, just as they were against his parents. In high school, it was no better, because he was known to wear his Sunday best every day to school and to always carry a Bible with him.
He was one of those nerds.
Not only that, he would often chastise his peers for drinking, smoking, and dancing, and would interrupt social events to stop these behaviors and insist the group read the Bible with him.
He sounds like the actual worst person.
I read that and I thought, Footloose?
It's giving Footloose, but he sounds like just like the worst person that you would ever want to be around.
He was the person who every time he found where you all hang out, you would find a new hangout and just hope he didn't find it.
Exactly. He sounds like such a fucking buzzkill.
Now, everything about him is pretty terrible here, up until now. But now we're going to get into, like, the one shining, like, the one probably good thing about Jim Jones.
Okay.
And it was that during his youth, he witnessed the mistreatment of an African American man at a baseball game, which led him to pursue racial equality and civil rights for the rest of his life.
Period. I'm here for that.
Yes.
Racial equality. Fight the power. Hell yeah.
Now, this did put him at odds with his father, Old Jim, who was a member of the KKK.
His dad was a member of the KKK?
In Indiana!
That's crazy.
It's not even that southern!
Right. He must have really
Do you know
had
what's
hatred.
really scary? I was curious because I also heard I saw a TikTok the other day of some woman berating people because she was she was filming her friend and she went, "All you Trump supporters, you have to live the rest of your life knowing that you voted for the man endorsed by the KKK." And I was like, how can the I thought we got rid of that. Why is that not classified as a terrorist organization? And I looked it up. It is still active.
Yeah. The KKK came to my hometown a couple years back and did a little parade or something. And of course they got ran out of town because there's good people in my town.
Oh my God.
Yeah, their KKK is active and there's still awful people in this world with a lot of hate in their heart. But I hope that this racial equality that Jim Jones was fighting for during some of his life hopefully made up for...
Most of his life. I will give him that. If he was not a cult leader and a mass murderer, he'd probably be known as a civil rights leader.
Right.
Anyways, back to the story.
Okay.
So it was during this time that this odds with his father over African Americans. He tried to bring an African American friend home, and Old Jim refused to let him in the house, and so Jones stopped speaking to his father. And in 1945, Lynette and Old Jim separated, and she and Jim, the son, moved to Richmond, Indiana, and he never spoke to his father again.
You know what? You gotta do what you gotta do. If your parent is actively a bad person and hates people for things they can't control, who they are.
Now, I don't know if that's really why he stopped speaking to his father, because remember, this is a pathological liar who's the son of a pathological liar.
Right.
So we're going to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Mm-hmm. Now, it was at Richmond that he completed high school and would begin attending Indiana University of Bloomington. He had first attempted to study to become a doctor, but soon quit that course. He would later hear a speech from Eleanor Roosevelt on the plight of African Americans, to which he readily agreed with and became more active in the political struggle for civil rights. And he soon began to adopt and preach socialist and radical political philosophy.
See, it's hard to be hell yeah, I'm here for all this because I know what he does in the future. So it's hard to be
try and forget that.
Yeah, if he didn't do crazy, awful things, killed all those people in the future, hell yeah, this stuff is awesome. He's fighting for equality.
Now, around this time, Lynette and Old Jim would divorce, and his family would cut Lynette and Jim off financially. So Jim had to take a job at Reed Hospital as an orderly. While his supervisors were happy with his work, his coworkers remarked that he was strange and interacted oddly with patients, such as being a little too eager and a little too excited about doing sponge baths.
He just wanted to see those old people naked in those tubs.
Let me get in your crevices.
He loved getting under those folds.
Now, while working at Reed Hospital, he began dating nurse in training Marceline Baldwin, whom he would marry in 1949. Now, Marceline was a devout Methodist and was the daughter of a couple who were very involved in local politics and the local Methodist church.
Okay. So two things that Jim Jones is very into: religion and politics.
Now, this might sound cute, he was an orderly, she was a nurse. How cute! You're probably thinking it starts out cute. No, it doesn't. Because immediately upon marrying, he would often try to test her love and loyalty by randomly telling her someone close to her had died, comforting her. And then, once he got her calmed down, go, I guess you do love me if you would let me comfort you.
That's the most emotionally manipulative bullshit. Is that gaslighting or no? Gaslighting is something different.
It's very much like gaslighting. I
It's
don't think it's like textbook gaslighting, but it's very similar.
That's the craziest emotional manipulation. But also on her, if she fell for it more than once, like, girl, that's on you. If you keep falling for that shit, like, if he keeps telling you people are dying and they're not actually dying,
Yeah.
fall for it twice, shame on you. Shame on him.
But you know what? I bet you he like did it twice, and then like the third time he was like, "Oh, your grandma died," and she's like, "Fuck you." And then the phone rang, and it was her parents, and it's like, "Grandma died." And I bet she was like, "I can and I bet that little piece of guilt. Like, this is not a true story. This is just theory. But like, if that happened, and that guilt probably just like every time he pulled it. But he would oftenly emotionally abuse her and sometimes like beat her to get his way. Like he wanted to attend a Pentecostal church that was integrated, and she was like, "No, I'm a Methodist. I've always been a Methodist. I'm going." And like they would get into huge fights, and finally he acquiesced and said, "Okay, I'll go to Methodist services with you." But behind and like he would go and he'd seem like he was the most devout person there. Meanwhile, at home, he's telling Marceline, "I'm only going if you will admit like become an atheist and admit there's no God."
See, that's so fucking weird. This, like, being so devoutly, like, going to these churches and, like...
Putting on a show.
Right.
But also, like, I know, like, lots of people are, like, in, like, the back of the mind, they're like, "Oh, there's no God," but they still go to church just, like, cuz.
Right.
But, like, he's, like, actually telling people.
It's wild, for sure.
Now, Jones, meanwhile, started to become increasingly involved in socialism and the Communist Party. In 1951, he and his family began attending local meetings of the Communist Party despite the Red Scare happening throughout the country. Jones claimed at one point his mother was harassed by FBI agents for attending meetings with him. Jones later said that the persecution of communists in the country led him to joining the church as a way to spread his thoughts without fear of reprisal, because if you wrap it up in religion, you can say it.
Right. Jesus was kind of a socialist.
Jesus was very much a socialist, and that's why modern-day Christians hate him.
Right. People don't want to admit it, but he preached for loving each other. And
I don't believe in socialist black Jesus. I only believe in white Jesus.
it's very that whitewashed version of God.
That clip from Ab Fab, like, and what was Jesus wearing? Blue. That was a demon!
Oh my God.
In 1952, Jones unexpectedly announced to his wife he was going to become a Methodist minister in order to spread his socialism.
Okay, it's kind of funny when you think about it. He's
The fact that he said that, you know he said it exactly that way. Like, I cannot preach my socialism openly for fear of reprisal, so I'm going to become a Methodist minister.
Right. He's very much a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Very much. Believe it or not, he soon got a position as a student pastor, like a youth minister, at the Somerset Southside Methodist Church in Indiana, where he launched a project to build a racially integrated playground.
Period. Okay.
Yeah. So, like, he's actually doing it because, like I said, his parents-in-law were involved in the church and they helped him, like, get this position. However, within 2 years, he was fired for stealing church funds for his own, but he would later claim it was because church leadership forbade him from having an integrated congregation, and so he left the church.
Girl. No, he was stealing. Let's be real. He was stealing.
Oh, no, like, there are records of him stealing. It's just what he said.
Socialism, but also I'm going to steal from you.
And that comes up time and time again in this story. Shortly before this, Jones had attended a Pentecostal church convention where one woman prophesied he was going to be a great prophet with a vast and lasting ministry.
I mean, it was lasting. The memory of it was lasting.
So after he was forced out of the Methodist church and with this prophecy, which he wholeheartedly embraced, Jones forced Marceline to abandon the Methodist church and convert to Pentecostalism, and he began to hold revival meetings at the Laurel Street Tabernacle. However, the Assemblies of God denomination who owned the church were against revivals and dismissed Jones, who moved to establish his own church called Wings of Healing. However, Only 20 of his congregation followed him, and he soon had to take a series of odd jobs to make money, including selling spider monkeys door to door.
He sold what?
Spider monkeys. Like, he sold pet monkeys.
Door to... Is that even... Well, I guess it was legal back then, but...
Hello, ma'am. Can I interest you in purchasing a pet spider monkey? They're really spunky pets. And while I'm at it, can I tell you about my church?
That's insane. Like, if someone selling you something
and you
like
know what, this
monkeys...
worked because there was one woman, she talked about, like, after Jonestown, she talked about, like, I met Jim Jones because my mother-in-law had a pet monkey who died, and she wanted to get a new one, and she saw an ad in the newspaper, Jim Jones, pet monkeys, and she called him, and she met him, and they got to talking, and he invited her to church, and she said, will you come to this guy's church with me? And they became members.
That's crazy that actually worked. Like, why are you trusting the spider monkey salesman? That's insane. Like, this is a strange man going door to door with exotic animals.
The 50s must have been a wild time.
It must have.
I said that to my grandfather. I said, did anyone try to sell you a spider monkey door to door? And he said, no, but also my parents opened the door and they wouldn't have fallen for that.
Well, the modern version of that is the sugar gliders. Do you remember those?
I love those.
That's the modern version of that.
Can you sell those door to door? I see. You live in an apartment. You don't get door to door salesmen.
No.
I get door to door salesmen.
Really?
But now, so the real modern equivalent is, can I interest you in solar panels?
Solar panels? Do you need your windows replaced?
Do you have Verizon? Would you like to lower your cable bill?
Right.
Who has cable still?
No one has fucking cable.
Now, Jones soon left, so he soon turned to the Independent Assemblies of God, who had few requirements for ordination and approved of revivals, which he would hold to gain followers and funds. He began to hold joint revivals with the famed revivalist and alleged faith healer William Branham. And I keep saying revivals. Do you know what that is?
A revival? Not really.
So, you've probably heard the term tent revival.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And so this is at the time, right after World War II, where a lot of people were going around, pastors would go around and they would pitch a tent in a town, like a circus tent.
Mm-hmm.
And they would invite people in and they would preach. And a lot of them would claim to be faith healers. And they'd be like, I'm going to pray over you and I'm going to heal you of your ailments.
Right.
And William Branham was one of the most famous of this time. Jones was fascinated with him because Branham said that he could tell random members of the congregation, Brother Paul, I know you're from redacted address.
Mm-hmm.
That is your home address. And you have come to my revival to pray away your homosexual tendencies. The Lord through me has heard your prayers. You are cured, my brother in Christ.
My brother in Christ.
Yes.
I know you came here to cure your burning from down under.
Oh, not
you
the
went to the pool hall last night.
Not the pool.
Few dames that gave you the burning from down under, but the Lord will cure your burning from down under.
I prefer to call it the thunder from down under. Ow, ow! That's an Australian, like, Chippendales.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was going to get more of a laugh. I'm sorry.
We'll get them next time, guys. Don't worry.
Now, their meetings together were hugely successful, and at one point, Branham prophesied that Jones, Brother Jones here, Brother Jim, if you will.
If you're nasty.
He has great, I say great, healing abilities. Only surpassed by my own. And he is going to be a hugely successful minister, I say to you. I don't know if William Branham was from the South, but, like, it just fits.
It does. It very much does.
This endorsement led to Jones' small congregation growing to over 1,000 regular attendees in the course of, like, weeks.
Damn, we need an endorsement like that.
Jones also would regularly attend conferences and other tent revivals to network and draw more congregants. He was especially adept at drawing in African American parishioners with his preachings on racial equality.
Period. Okay.
He would adopt many aspects of Branham's style and even his claims to be a reincarnation of the prophet Elijah and Jesus Christ himself, calling himself a manifestation of Cross the Revolution.
See, that's a red flag. If anyone comes to you claiming to be Christ incarnate, red flag right away. Steer away from that person.
And if this isn't crazy enough, he also preached, "The end is nigh."
And that's another red flag. If they're telling you the world is ending now, it's probably not. That's another big red flag for cults. The world's probably not ending right now, and they probably don't know when the world is going to end.
Soon, however, he and Branham would split due to Branham's condemnation of Jones's communism and Branham's own racial beliefs.
Oh, so he was a racist.
I don't believe he. I didn't want to get into the weeds. I don't think he believed in integration.
Oh my God.
So Jones renamed his church the People's Temple Christian Church Full Gospel.
Atlarge.com.
LLC.
Right. The longest name.
Incorporated. He did this to signify communion with the Full Gospel Pentecostal movement, to draw more people in, but very quickly shortened the name to simply the People's Temple.
Oh. Yeah, because you can't have a name. If you want something that sticks, it has to be small and concise so people can say it quickly. No one's going to say the full name if you have a long-ass name.
And when I say the People's Temple, there was no apostrophe.
Oh.
Like signifying possession, like the people own the temple.
Mm-hmm.
It was the People's Temple. Like many people's temple.
So, like, the people were the temple?
Yes.
Okay.
They did not possess it, they were the temple.
They were the temple. Interesting. I like that little
It's
nuance.
socialism!
I like that little nuance there.
Yes.
That's nice.
I also wanted to tell you, so that when you start labeling, I think you don't put a bunch of apostrophes that don't belong.
And I still might.
Jones soon became aware of the Reverend Major Jealous Divine.
That's quite the name.
Dr. Silky Nutmeg Ganache.
It very much does sound
It
like
does
a drag
that.
name.
In his international peace mission movement, Father Divine, as he was more commonly known by his followers, had named himself after a passage of the Bible where God said of himself that he was a jealous God. And Father Divine said, in this passage, God said his own name was jealous. And how did he know this? Because he was God and his name was jealous. Red flag.
Very that.
Jones met with Divine several times throughout the late 50s and early 60s, and soon began to copy Divine's preachings on communal living and community outreach, such as having soup kitchens and like stores for the needy, as well as Divine's disciplinary practices becoming increasingly involved in his congregation's private lives, all while publicly preaching Divine's teachings about himself being God were wrong. However, despite this, in the same breath he would say, so basically he'd be like, Father Divine is not God, but if he is, I'm his successor.
He said, just in case anyone was confused.
So he was really saying like, my brother, the Father Divine, is not God incarnate, but I am his successor as God incarnate on this planet.
On the off chance that I'm wrong and he is. See, that's crazy. That's giving... What are those people... I'm forgetting the word right now for people who think there might be a God. They just don't have proof. Agnostic.
Yes.
It's giving agnostic. Yeah. I got there.
Now, Jones began skipping around... So as Jones skipped around these denominations and still shticks and gimmicks to increase his own congregation, he also began to garner some political power.
Ooh.
In 1960, he was appointed director of the Indianapolis Human Rights Commission, but the mayor urged him to keep a low profile. Instead, he used the position to secure television and radio interviews and even gave a speech at a NAACP conference where he was wildly applauded.
You know what? Say what you want, but that's marketing. He's a smart
Yes.
He's good at marketing.
Yes,
He knows
and that's
what
the
he's
thing.
doing.
He did not have a belief in his heart. He did not let that stop him.
Right. He's still, like, going for the damn thing.
And that's what I mean, like, with the Father Divine. Like, he would actively preach against Father Divine, but in the same breath go, but I am his brother and I am his heir.
Right. He's, like, covering all of his bases,
Yes.
basically.
Jones actively sought to integrate the entire city of Indianapolis and did so through a mix of publicity, counseling, and in some cases, sting operations of businesses which would not serve African American customers. One tactic he would often use was to bring an African American colleague to a restaurant, and if the owner asked him to leave because they were not integrated, he would swear he'd either put the restaurant out of business if he was turned out, or if the owner integrated, he would bring him fast business. If the owner agreed to integrate, Jones would return with half or more of his congregation, fill the restaurant and pay for all of their meals, and publicize the newly integrated restaurant in the newspapers to continue bringing African American clientele in.
See, we just keep going back and forth with him because this is a good thing he's doing.
Yeah, basically saying, like, you can have empty tables, or if you integrate, I can make sure you fill them.
Right. So he's doing good things, and it's just... He's so conflicting, because you know he's doing some bad shit.
Despite the misgivings of the politicians, Jones almost single-handedly integrated the entire city of Indianapolis in the span of just 1 year.
See, that's very impressive, and that's awesome. Like, that's very impressive, and that's... Like I said, that's cool. That's awesome.
Now we're going to get into less awesome.
Okay, let's get into less awesome.
In 1961, Jones told his congregation that he had visions of a nuclear war which would destroy Indianapolis.
He knew he had him in the palm of his hands,
Yes.
and now was the time for the doomsday.
And this is the other thing that Jim Jones did really well, was he would preach the end of the world, but he would talk about it just vaguely enough that when it, like, it wouldn't be like, on May 15th, 1961, the world's going to end. Mm-hmm. And then when it... I'm going by the Gregorian calendar or something weird like that.
Right.
It would just be like, it is coming.
Right, you have to keep them on their toes. You got to keep people scared.
So he began to look for a place to move his congregation to escape the coming war. He read in an Esquire article that South America would be one of the safest places in the case of nuclear war, and he packed up his entire family and moved to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where they sought a new location for the People's Temple and worked amongst the poor. However, Jones's ministry there was just one of many evangelical ministries throughout Rio, because at this time, if you had a missionary church, you were working in the slums of Rio de Janeiro.
That's crazy.
Everyone was down there.
I wonder why. That's crazy.
There was just like so many at the time.
That's so weird.
Well,
Such a random place.
We're going to fact check this after the fact, and if it's not truth, we'll cut it.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure, like, Rio de Janeiro is, like, one of, like, it's very touristy, but, like, its slums are, like, one of the, like, most vast and poor in the world.
Oh, interesting. So they're taking advantage of poor people.
Yes. Well, I mean, they were he truly did believe in socialism, and he was trying to help.
Okay.
But here's the thing. When you're just one... Jones is used to being big fish in a small pond. Now he's a little fish in a big pond. Because back home, his socialist teachings of, like, soup kitchens and opening homeless shelters, racial integration, made him stand out. Here, everyone's doing soup kitchens. Everyone's doing clothing drives.
Right.
And soon he became distraught that he left the civil rights movement home just as it was really starting to heat up. Because remember, this is the early 60s. This is the Selma marches. This is the Freedom Riders. This is the March on Washington and Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream. And he's missing it all.
He's missing the good shit. He's missing
Literally.
all the shit he worked for.
All the stuff that you learn about in first grade about civil rights, he's missing.
See, that would suck because he worked so hard for it. It'd be like... I don't know, like working all your life for gay pride and then moving somewhere where you're not allowed to be gay and all of a sudden it's legal here. Or like marriage becomes legal or something.
It's like, I don't even know if we have a modern day equivalent yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Maybe soon. Ominous music plays. Meanwhile, at home, the People's Temple was falling apart as Jones ordered that all money raised by the church was to be sent to support him in Rio. His deputies began fighting over their own belief systems and would break off, taking their congregants with them.
Oh.
And fighting within the congregation over, this is what Father Jim meant. No, this is what he meant. And so they would just like side with someone and leave, or they would just leave a church.
And part of that's probably Jim's fault because he probably kept his teaching so vague it probably could be interpreted so many ways.
It was very socialist, not very Christian.
Right.
And as we know, when it comes to Christianity, I can believe that I can't even get into it. Like, you can literally, like, you can fight over, it was 1,000 loaves and 1,000 fishes. No, it was thousands of loaves and thousands of fishes, and fight over that. So having driven his church into debt, and with it about to collapse, Jones returned to the United States in December 1963. And despite privately regarding the entire event as a failure, he publicly claimed to have returned because he returned at a very bad point for the United States, but a very good point for him, because he returned right after JFK had been assassinated. Mm-hmm. And despite regarding the event as a failure, he came back and he said, "Brothers and sisters, our brother, President John F. Kennedy, a great leader in the movement of civil rights, has been slain by the Nazi white supremacists. But God has called me back to you to protect you from the coming war."
Right? Big events like that are just like amazing for people like him because they can prey on it, they can take advantage of it, and like basically take advantage of when people are weak and like there's all this uncertainty of what's going on.
Now, to distract the congregation from that he had left from the fact that the church was on the verge of ruin due to his own hubris, he began preaching of further visions of nuclear annihilation and the need to find the new Eden.
It's in Missouri.
In 1964, Jones moved the People's Temple to Redwood Valley in Northern California. Mm-hmm. There he was forced to take a teaching job to adult students to supplement his income, and used it to preach Marxism and the importance of religion. He would also plant loyalists within his classes to help him recruit students into his congregation. And this worked. As the People Temple began to regrow, Jones began to take on a more political tone. His teachings became less focused on Christ and more on socialism. He called his teachings apostolic socialism, and used religion as a way to sway evangelical and traditionalist Christians to embrace socialist ideas. He soon wrote and published a manifesto extolling socialism, claiming the Bible was a paper idol written by the alcoholic slave trader King James of England, Scotland, and talking of a coming race war in which Nazis and white supremacists would take over the world and put African Americans in extermination camps. Red flag central.
Yes, but he did it smart. He started off slow, and he just slowly built in the crazy shit.
Now, and here's the other problem, that as he's regoing this, is Jones was the micromanager. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, all right, Dorothy, you're going to run fundraising, and you're going to run outreach, and you're going to run counseling. He had to run everything. So he started taking amphetamines to do everything.
Amphetamines are like coke, right?
Speed.
Speed?
Meth.
Okay.
He's taking meth.
Oh, he's doing meth. Okay.
He's doing meth. And then, I mean, it's the 60s. Everyone was doing meth. But then to slow down, at night he would take barbiturates to sleep. And so because he's constantly on uppers and downers, his eyes started to turn bloodshot red. Mm-hmm. And so he started experimenting with like wearing sunglasses constantly to hide the fact.
Interesting. He was on uppers and downers and
Yes.
sideways and he was probably cracked out most of the time.
Jones soon turned his eyes from the quiet Redwood Valley to metropolitan San Francisco. His teachings of socialism and radical change were readily accepted in the political upheaval of the late 1960s as great reformist leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy were also assassinated.
So there's a lot of turmoil in the world
Yes.
he can take advantage
It's
of.
the late 60s.
Yeah, and he can
Woodstock, Vietnam.
and he can take full advantage of it.
And he did. The congregation began to multiply quickly, at which point he moved to San Francisco. And he began to hold revivals in rival churches where he would claim to heal planted flowers to gain new members. At one point, he even visited an event at the grave of Father Divine, who died in 1965, where he claimed to be the reincarnation and successor of Divine until Divine's wife had him thrown out.
Can you imagine?
I know you are all here to remember Reverend Divine, but do not mourn him. I am his reincarnation.
That's such a shitty thing to do.
Which is bad because Father Divine actually, he got, his first wife died.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that, he married a much younger woman, claimed that she was a reincarnation of his first wife, and named his successor. So he deadass walked up to Reverend Divine's name successor and said, actually, I'm his successor. And she's probably like, fuck you, this is my meal ticket.
Girl. He's really said, let me make this funeral about me. And
One thing about Jones is he doesn't believe any of this shit at this point. But all these other people, it's did they actually believe what they were saying?
Yeah, I think the people did. People believed very much what they were doing.
I will say, Jones definitely at the start believed what he was saying, but as it went on, he started believing it less and less.
Yeah.
But the problem was he's believed in the Christianity and the socialism less and less, and believed in himself more and more.
Very that.
Jones, whose true religion was power, wasn't content with just a large congregation, and soon got involved in politics again. He became very involved in George Mosconi's campaign for mayor of San Francisco and helped the liberal Moscone win the election in the still conservative city by holding events for African American voters who still admired Jones for working in civil rights. Moscone then appointed Jones commissioner of the city's housing authority, basically making sure he made Jones in charge of housing to make sure that housing was equal opportunity. Soon Jones was himself a rising star in liberal progressive politics. He hosted events for San Francisco gay rights activist and politician Harvey Milk at the Temple.
Period. Come on, Harvey.
Milk actually wrote him letters saying that was the most phenomenal service I've ever been to, and extolling him.
Nice.
He was honored at a dinner attended by his good friend Governor Jerry Brown of California. He was friends with the governor.
You knew a lot of high-power people.
Days before the 1976 presidential election, he met with the Democratic vice presidential candidate Walter Mondale, who, after winning the election with Jimmy Carter, endorsed the People's Temple.
Okay, that's crazy.
And, like John Wayne Gacy, he met Rosalind Carter multiple times. They became pen pals. And she spoke at the grand opening of the Temple's location in San Francisco. But at the event, he got a longer, louder ovation than she did.
That's embarrassing for
Poor
her.
Rosalind Carter. And I was listening to last podcast on Loud. And they're like, what is it with Rosalind Carter meeting serial killers? And I think it was Marcus said she just had the misfortune of being first lady in the late 70s.
It's very that. There were a lot of serial killers at that point, and a lot of them had powerful friends.
Now, despite Jones's apparently being on the ascent, the temple was soon to be rocked by scandal and bad publicity.
Oh, no.
Despite his marriage to Marceline, which is going on 30 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Or 20 years. And them having adopted multiple children together. So they had one biological children. He adopted a Cherokee girl, 3 Korean Americans, a black boy, and a white boy who was the son of a congregant.
Okay. Inclusive.
And he called it his rainbow family.
Inclusivity, okay, period.
And he did encourage, like, he adopted his Korean American children during the Korean War, and he encouraged his congregants, like, please, like, often to adopt Korean babies who don't have anyone to take care of them. So he wasn't a terrible guy all around.
Hey, that's good.
However, he was known to have multiple affairs with followers and then would pay for them to have abortions because he did not like condoms and he liked to finish in them. One follower, Carolyn Layton, was allowed to keep her son Jones, who was named Jim John.
And he came on to open Jimmy John's, the Subway franchise that rocked the nation.
Carolyn would be inducted into Jones's inner circle and regarded as his second command. It was known for her ruthless authoritarianism. She'll come up more in part 2. In 1973, Jones was arrested for lewd conduct when he unknowingly solicited a police officer in a public bathroom and was then caught masturbating in public by said police officer. So, what you would do is gay men would cruise, and you would stick your foot a little bit under the stall, and you would tap it.
Right.
And that was the sign. And so he did this, and the police officer walked in to find Jim Jones with his monster song. Apparently he was well hung out and already masturbating. And so the police officer arrested him with his pants down. But Jones was so powerful that, like, it came to arraignment, and immediately the judge threw the case out.
So Jim Jones is a little gay.
Yes.
That's crazy. I didn't know all that. That's wild.
And as I mentioned before, he became a rampant drug user, taking amphetamines to give him energy and the barbiturates at night. And remember I said his eyes started to turn bloodshot red? Yeah. At this point, he was taking so many that his eyes were permanently bloodshot red, and he had to permanently wear sunglasses. He claimed that he was so divine and he could see God that if he took his glasses off, he would burn you with the rays of heaven.
He's so full of shit. Like, how did no one see through this? Like, what are we doing?
Meanwhile, one of Jones's most useful recruiting techniques was healing at revivals. It was a well-known hoax.
Right.
He would plant a loyalist in the audience and call them up and say, "You, my brother, have terminal cancer. And I'm going to cast that Satan of cancer out of you with the power of Christ Jesus God." And this is not very slick. The loyalists would go in the bathroom and come back with a bunch of bloody paper towels and go, "I shat the tumor out." And it was just a chicken gizzard that had been left to rot for a couple days.
That's disgusting.
And what's even grosser is, if anyone tried to look at it closer, the loyalists would swallow it.
That gave me a very visceral reaction because, like, that's disgusting, and they probably got so sick from swallowing those chicken guts.
It's fine. Jones can just heal them.
Girl, that's crazy, and that means the people were in on his lies. The people, his loyalists.
When I say a loyalist, I mean, like, it wasn't a member of the congregation. It was like a member of the inner circle.
Right. So that means he wasn't the only one in
In other instances, he would invite somebody to the church, and he would send 2 loyalists in disguise to interview them for the census. And they would ask all these personal questions, come back to Jones, and Jones at the meeting would go, "You're here to pray for your dog Spanky, who has a tumor on his back left leg. How'd you know?"
Right, they're tricksters. He's a trickster. He's a fraud and a charlatan.
Very much that. And also at this time, like, he said in articles, so it started in the early 70s, he said that he was agnostic. By this point, he admitted in an article that he was an atheist and that he was basically preaching socialism wrapped up in Christianity terms to win people over.
I mean, that's what he was doing. There's no lie there.
In March of 1977, Marshall Kilduff published an article in the New West magazine exposing Jim Jones as a fraud and charlatan and revealing allegations of mental, physical, and sexual abuse from former members of the People Temple.
I'm very interested how he's going to refute that, because it's all true.
Now, Jones was ready for this. For years, he had been preaching that the government was going to raid the church as the first step in the racial war.
That's how he did it.
As early as 1973, 4 years before, Jones had began coming up with plans for an escape from the United States in the case of an event such as this. He had chosen Guyana, which had in South America, which had recently revolted against the United Kingdom and had a socialist government. Actually, on his way to Rio, he had stopped there and held revivals that were hugely successful with the local population. In December of 1974, the first set of settlers from the People's Temple were set with supplies to begin building what Jones called the Promised Land, which is, once again, he's constantly adopting these, from old,
These Bible terms.
No, not even Bible terms, but specifically African American religious terms.
Oh, yeah.
And he did that to sway African Americans, and it kind of started out for racial justice, but also remember what I said about trying to capitalize on people's vulnerability.
Right.
At this time, the African American community was a vulnerable community because it was just burgeoning within the civil rights movement.
Right, and he's capitalizing on that.
And he was. In December, I read that. At the start of 1977, the settlement located in the jungle a few miles from Kayatoma had a population of 50 people who were building and expanding it. In May 1977, amid the ongoing scandal, Jones set the machinations which would end his life and those of many of his followers. When he gathered 600 of his congregation and took them to the settlement, he promptly renamed upon arrival as Jonestown, with 400 following just after him.
So how many people are there right now? 450?
No, he showed up. So within a month, 1,000.
So there's 1,000 people in Guyana following him. Mm-hmm. You have to be such a powerful person to get.
Now, remember what I mentioned about Father Divine was hugely involved in his congregation's personal life. He was like that too. It was, you have to sign your mortgage over to me and give me access to your bank account.
See, and that's what's scary about it. And people do that in modern day religions too. What is it? Mormons, I think, have to give so much of their income to the church.
Yeah.
It's just so crazy to think about. And, to convince someone to move out of the country they're currently living in to another country, you have to have such a power over that person already. And it's also a cult tactic. Take these people out of where they're comfortable, take them away from everything they know, their support system, and separate them and isolate them, and then they're in a vulnerable spot.
Really good thing I heard while I was researching this was when you're a cult member, you basically live in the mind of your cult leader. Because at that point, you're just so willing to give yourself over to him that if he says, we're eating nothing but grass from now on, you're eating nothing but grass from now on.
Right. And his message had to have been a powerful one to some people, because 1,000 people is a lot of people to just up and move there.
Yes.
Those people, they must have been scared or something, because that's so crazy.
Yeah, you just, if you give yourself over to it for whatever reason. And I belonged to a culty church at one point. When I was trying to explore my own faith and whatnot. And I got drawn in by the whole we're more casual and we're just friends. And the pastor was, I'm no different than you. I have a wife and kids and a family and a job. And I'm just going to explain the Bible in simple man's term. And I was very won over by that. But also, I'm the worst cult member because I do have critical thinking. And I can think from my own. And as soon as somebody said, did you ever think about praying the gay away? I went,
what are we doing here? What are we doing? But also, people like to be a part of something. They like to feel like they belong somewhere. And Also, like, let's say you start moving up the ranks in the church, you're like,
And we'll get more into, there was a lot of bullying, there was a lot of physical abuse that would force you to stay.
Yeah. This is such a crazy story.
Yeah, part 1 is just Jim Jones and the building of his temple and how we got to Guyana.
And honestly, it is kind of a story of targeting a vulnerable people and taking advantage of that and really.
And that's the thing. I mean, if you think about it, he targeted, and I'm not saying that the African American population is a vulnerable one now, but at this point in time, it probably is, because it's just burgeoning through the civil rights movement. Right. And he started well before the civil rights movement was really getting traction. And he's also targeting poor people.
Right. He targeted the people he knew he could convince to do things.
And he's saying, there is a promised land for you. I will lead you there. Which, and also, he's not targeting like the strongest in this community. He is targeting the weakest.
Right.
You are weak. Let me carry your burden.
Right. And well, just for you, right, we aren't calling the African American community
not at
weak.
all.
Not at all. You're not a weak people. They're not a weak people. Poor people aren't a weak people. It's just they were vulnerable in that political and
at that
social
political scape, and he preyed on the vulnerable members of that community.
Yeah, people who didn't have as many rights and things.
And he used his own like work within the civil rights to prey on the weak members of that community.
Exactly. It's almost like performative activism.
And I honestly think, like, if he had stayed longer in San Francisco with the way, like, what it became in terms of LGBT and queer culture, he probably would have, like, converted a bunch of gay people, too.
He probably would have.
I mean, Harvey Milk, he had Harvey Milk eating out of his hand.
Right. He probably would have focused on the gay community at some point and tried to bring them in, too. I mean, he was cruising for men. Like,
Yes. We will cover a little more about his bisexuality, queerness in the next episode, because he did use that against people as well.
Right. This is just such an interesting story, and there's just so much to talk about. It's not really a comedy story. It's more of a make you think story. It's a what the fuck, and it makes you think.
You know, I listened. My main source was last podcast on the left. They did a 5-part series on this.
Yeah, amazing series.
Amazing, and I'm trying to convince 5 parts down to 2. They tried to do 4, and they had to expand it. I'm not expanding it past 2. Like, I will cut as much information out as I can to make it fit into. But Marcus said at the end of it, he said, most true crime and cult stories, you get to the end of it and you think, fuck, I'm ready for the next one. This one, I'm fascinated. I could do 100 more episodes on it and still be interested.
Right, because there's so many aspects to it.
And like I said at the beginning, he struggled to define whether his religion was Christianity or socialism, but he had one God, and that God was power and glory.
Very that. I'm already so ready for the next part.
Oh, me too. Next week.
Gosh, yes.
Please tune in again next week. And we also have a live show. When does this come out?
It comes out
in early June.
Yeah, early June. It's not happened yet.
It has not happened. We have a live show coming up. We are doing Gettysburg Ghosts. We actually went and investigated. Please come to hear about our experiences and our investigation. You can get tickets at the link that we're going to have below. If you're not in the Pittsburgh tri-state area, you can get streaming only tickets. If you are in the area and you'd like to come drink with us in person, please do so and get that BYOB enhancement so you can actually drink with us. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you do listen. Please connect with us either by DMing us, texting us on any of our audio only, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts. There's a link to text us. We can't reply, but maybe one day we'll do like a question and answer where we read them back. Or DM us. We can message you back there. And if you have personal stories, if you know somebody who's in the People's Temple or any other paranormal story or supernatural, please email us at our email. Paul, where can they find you?
You can find me on my personal Instagram and TikTok at Paul Lember, PAULEMBER. And as usual, it's not delivery, it's DiGiorno.
And if you'd like to follow me, you can do so on TikTok and on Instagram at The Real Deej Powers. And also, I want to shout it out here. We've started it last month, and we're really trying to make it go hard. But on Tuesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard on TikTok, we're doing Twinks and Drinks, where we do a post show where we talk about last week's episode a little more freeform. We go to a few more tangents. We share a couple more things that we've been able to ruminate on. So please join us there. And until next time, don't get trapped in a cult, but keep your grips tight.
And your corks loose. Bye.
Oh, you splurged on the Del Paso enchilada sauce.
Some anchovy.
For these taquitos.
I love a taquito. I could use a taquito
Wait.
right now.
Wait, is this beef or is this chicken taquitos?
It's both.
Oh, my
it's
lord.
Mixed meat.
Not the mixed meats.